Hi everyone, my name is Kayla. I'm a Bachelor of Health Science Naturopathy. I'm a naturopath at Kayla the Nurturing Naturopath. Welcome to my podcast awareness. This month, September, is Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders, FASD Awareness Month. And I have Sophie from the National Organisation for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders, NOFASD Australia, joining me today. Hi Sophie, how are you?
Hi, Kayla. I'm great, thank you. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Could you please tell us what is FASD Awareness Month?
I certainly can. Yeah, it's an initiative that started many years ago, actually in Canada and in the States as well, and really looking at raising awareness for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder to help raise awareness of the harms of alcohol at any stage during a pregnancy, but really focusing on using the number nine for the ninth minute of the ninth hour of the ninth day of the ninth month to recognise the 9 months of the pregnancy period. And really to help talk about FASD more because it's a hidden disability more often than not, and one that is attached, sadly, to a lot of shame and blame. So, wearing red shoes, which was something that was started by RJ Formanek over and our cousins across the waters, and yeah, it really started to have a conversation and encourage people to talk about FASD more.
That's great. And what exactly is FASD?
So, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or FASD, is a diagnostic term. So, it's used to describe the impacts on the brain and body of individuals who have been prenatally exposed to alcohol. So, FASD is a lifelong disability, and individuals with FASD will experience some degree of challenge in their daily living and often need support. And it's very varied. So, that could be support in areas of motor skills, physical health, their learning, memory, attention, communication skills, but also and often emotional regulation and social skills as well. And, we do know with early supports and early interventions, it really can make such a huge difference to the life outcomes of individuals.
And how is it diagnosed?
So it's diagnosed through a multidisciplinary team, and that's a really important aspect and something that can sort of delay the process of diagnosis often because it is really quite complex and specialist. So we always encourage people listening or learning about FASD for the first time if they think that a member of their family or if they're supporting an individual, if they think they may have been prenatally exposed to alcohol and there's a trusting and supporting relationship and they want to find out more. Really, a first step is coming on to the NOFASD website. It's a plethora of information and gives people an opportunity to actually explore a little bit more to make sure that they sort of have got their facts about them when they actually go to approach a GP to talk through why they think they might need to step through the process of diagnosis. So the short answer is it's through a GP, referral to a paediatrician for those under 18, and then as well as other allied health professionals who will be part of that mix. There's 9 different brain domains that are assessed for FASD or can be assessed for FASD. And they may involve a psychologist or a neuropsychologist if you're exceptionally lucky, because they're very hard to find, a speech pathologist, an occupational therapist, or a physiotherapist. So there's a number of different allied health professionals who are part of the mix. But certainly the first step is to know a little bit more about FASD, which, as I've said, the NoFASD website can help with, or the FASD Hub is another website too. And then actually speaking with a GP to get a referral.
Oh, so important. And what is the National Organisation for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders Australia?
It's a mouthful, isn't it, Kayla? That's why we it's really important that people know that the no FASD part stands for the national organisation. So thank you for saying it in full.
Right.
But as an organisation, we're the peak body for families and individuals affected by FASD. We've been in the space for more than 25 years now. We celebrated our 25th anniversary last year. And it's a parent-led organisation that was really started grassroots around a kitchen table and remained on a volunteer basis for many years until around about 2012 when we first were funded by the Department of Health back in that time. And that's an ongoing basis at the moment in terms of being able to offer a helpline 7 days a week for families, but also a really broad range of resources and information and supports through our helpline as well. So we get involved in a lot of work in a lot of different spaces to really help to improve the quality of life for families and individuals. And that takes on many forms, Kayla, because it may be that we are providing education sessions, we're providing smooth referral processes through clinical scenarios, or it may be because we're engaging with researchers and supporting with the lived experience voice in that space as well. So I would say our role is really diverse, but having a helpline 7 days a week is huge for families and anybody who wants to know more about FASD and the supports as well.
Oh, that's great. And when was your organisation started, and why was it started?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so 25 years ago, we were in that space, and or more, I should say, probably 30 years ago. And the we is the royal we, because I wasn't here then. But Sue Myers, who is still very much part of NOFASD, is a wonderful volunteer. Founded the organisation with several other key volunteers as well, because they were seeing differences and developmental delays in their children. They were seeing that there were significant factors for the children in their world who weren't developing as their perhaps other biological children had developed, and started to seek out supports, because at that time there really was nothing in Australia that was related to FASD. So the founders had individually been able to get assessments by going overseas and become more FASD informed. And I still talk to Sue obviously regularly these days, and I know at the time she said, I wrote about 300 letters and sent them to all of the key ministers and people around the country that I believed needed to know about FASD, and thought, my job is done. Things will now happen. But unfortunately, FASD hasn't gone away, isn't going away, and is an area that we need to continue to talk about to help to reduce the stigma. But certainly that's why, as an organisation, we started, and we continue with that mission to this day.
My next question was, who are you? But you've sort of answered that, so thank you. What is your mission?
Well, really, it's about supporting families. It's supporting individuals with FASD across Australia. So we're a very small charity. Much of the work we do has to be online and through phone and Zoom and Teams. Thank goodness for the one positive, can I say, that came out of COVID, in my opinion, which was the online world became the norm, because that's a space that NOFASD have worked in for many years. And it really is about being able to support families and educating all services, all agencies, clinicians, and every single government agency that you can think of and service you can think of, so that it's broadening the understanding, broadening the thought process and the willingness to talk about FASD, and to bring a disability into the light that has been kept in the dark, much to do with our relationship around alcohol. And I say our being, as a country in Australia. I say that as an English woman, having lived in Australia for 21 years. So I come from a similar culture when it comes to alcohol. And for us, it's the more we can talk about it, the more we can work together with other organisations to raise awareness and have the conversation.
Yeah, so important. And what is your mission?
So I think we might have just talked about the mission, but certainly from a vision point of view, it's really about preventing prenatal alcohol exposure, which sounds like that might be a simple thing to do when people know more and more often now, and not everybody has this education and privilege of information, but more and more people know that alcohol can be harmful, and that alcohol can be harmful during every stage of pregnancy. But it's those unplanned pregnancies too, those early weeks when people aren't expecting to be pregnant. They may not have been planning to be pregnant, or didn't know or expect to fall pregnant, or might not have that knowledge. So really, the broader vision is about preventing prenatal alcohol exposure, and certainly improving the quality of life for families and individuals who are living with FASD.
I guess, like you said, your cause is to make FASD more talked about and to be there for people who need your help and support.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's about there's no wrong door, there's no wrong space. There's a phone to be spoken through for support, and confidential helpline that's 7 days a week makes a massive difference to so many families. And I probably might share a little bit more around my own lived experience in a minute as we sort of talk through a few more questions. But knowing
Yeah.
that it's okay to have the conversation,
Yeah.
and that FASD shouldn't be a diagnosis of last resort, because it can make such a difference. I don't know if you're aware, Kayla, or your listeners are aware, but prenatal alcohol exposure is the leading cause of non-genetic disability in Australia. So there's more children born each year with FASD than with autism spectrum disorder, with spina bifida, cerebral palsy, and Down syndrome combined. Recent prevalence study, for many years we've been referring to Canadian and US prevalence studies of around about 4 to 5%. But just a few months ago, the University of Sydney released an Australian prevalence study, and we're talking in mainstream population, 3.64%. So that's nearly 1 million people in Australia. This is why
Yeah.
we need to talk about FASD more.
So true, exactly right. I agree. And like you were saying, there's no safe amount of alcohol that can be drunk at any stage of pregnancy, but then there's the unplanned pregnancies. So, the women, aren't aware that they need to stop the drinking.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it's consumption of alcohol and prenatal alcohol exposure. We're always, and I say we, I'm sorry if I keep using that terminology, but I can say it as an I statement. But from my experience, and from my own personal experience, consumption of alcohol in the Australian culture is seen as the norm.
Yes.
It's seen as something that is, a substance, if we want to use that word, but it's a substance of pleasure, a substance of choice. It's a substance to, say, have a celebration or a commiseration. But as soon as that substance becomes a usage that is not seen as socially acceptable, people who use alcohol are seen as, it's all very negative connotations, very
Yes.
negative. And yet, society doesn't necessarily understand that people use alcohol for so many reasons. And whether it is as a social lubricant, whether it is for celebration or commiseration, or it's because there has been, traumatic circumstances in life, past or present, and alcohol use is not always easy to cease when somebody is under those situations. And you're right, Kayla, there is no proven safe amount of alcohol. There used to be guidelines around alcohol and pregnancy that many years ago said that it was okay to consume alcohol at low levels. They changed in 2009 and talked about not consuming alcohol, and it was safest not to. And then in 2020, it became very clear that the message that no alcohol consumption at all at any stage of the pregnancy. And it's a really difficult public health message, because I think as a society, we think, oh gosh, one or two doesn't hurt. And sadly, we still hear that information regularly. It's still mentioned by many health professionals who don't realise and haven't had that updated information shared with them or haven't sorted out. And the effects of prenatal alcohol exposure can be different for everyone. So statistically, the evidence suggests it's 1 in 13 alcohol-exposed pregnancies will result in a FASD outcome. So I think if we knew that, if all of communities knew that, as in when I say communities, I'm referring to want to be potential mums, but dads and grandparents and siblings, because if we all have that message, we often listen to our peers. And that's where it's powerful that we can actually support people who are thinking about becoming pregnant, rather than what we often hear is that, oh, don't worry, one or two won't hurt, or the messaging around, oh, why aren't you having a drink? It's not because you're pregnant, are you? And things like that, and it can be really tricky. I'm past that stage of life. People don't ask me anymore, Kayla, in terms of if I could be expecting if I'm not having a drink. But it's about really about support for everyone and understanding that there is no safe time.
Yes, yeah, so true. And if someone drinks during pregnancy, what does it increase the risk of? I know you said everyone's individual, it depends on the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you say, there are some key factors, and I think it's really important that because there is no safe level of amount of alcohol that's known to be safe, and obviously it wouldn't be ethical to test people when they're
Yes,
expected to ask because we know there is no safe level. Um, the effects of alcohol exposure can vary from one person to the next, and that's due to genetics, epigenetics, those of the mother, of the father, of the fetus. So it's so wide and varied. And also the timing of the alcohol exposure, the amount, the frequency. So there's a lot of different factors. So you will often hear people say, well, that can't be true because I know I consumed alcohol during my pregnancy, be it before I knew or after, and my child is fine. And that may be the case. But the 1 in 13 stat is obviously the one that we have to come back to. But to answer your question, some of those characteristics will often be physical, developmental, or neurobehavioral. So quite a broad range of potential factors. And that may be that that is through. So when we talked earlier a little bit about FASD being a lifelong disability, and I mentioned how people may be affected to different degrees and different levels, and really as I say, whether that could be motor skills or physical health, learning, memory, attention, communication, emotional regulation, or social skills, it's really quite varied, and individuals do have unique strengths too. It's not just the challenges, but some of those challenges we might see is that somebody might struggle with their impulse control or have difficulty regulating their emotions. And often individuals may become involved in situations that they don't anticipate. They aren't able necessarily to be able to see through cause and effect, because the different parts of our brain that can be affected by prenatal alcohol exposure are extensive, and that prefrontal cortex area is the last area to develop in the brain during the pregnancy, and is often the area that's most impacted by the alcohol exposure. So things like not realizing that the cause and effect, if I do this, this is what the outcome is going to be. There may be challenges with language, be it sort of expressive or receptive language, and being able to adapt to different situations as well can all be some of the key factors that an individual may be affected by.
support is available.
So it's an interesting question, and it's varied. And the key things, there's some points that are really not rocket science. And I say this whenever we're in scenarios where we're sharing information and working with support workers to talk about how else they might support the individuals that they're engaging with. Some of those foundational points really are about slowing the conversations down. It's about using concrete language, being very clear in how we engage with individuals, giving people extra time for processing, and also being very concrete in the language that we use. Repetition can be incredibly helpful to help really resolve and embed information and memory into our long-term memory, but also, really getting that support from people who understand FASD is crucial. So it can often, do more harm than good if somebody isn't FASD informed because they're not working with an individual in the spaces and the timing and the cognitive supports that might be needed. So from a broader extent, certainly through the NOFASD helpline, which I haven't actually mentioned the phone number, and I probably should. It's a 1-800 number, so free phone, but 1-800-860-613. And I'm sure we'll probably give it in the show notes as well, Kayla.
Yes. Yeah.
But being able to actually talk to somebody on the end of the phone who understands where a parent or caregiver or service provider or individual who is living with FASD can talk to, somebody who they can actually feel that they get them. The parents and caregivers that we engage with regularly have so many complex scenarios that occur and can be different every day. And getting that support in the external world when people don't necessarily understand FASD can be incredibly tiring, and the drain on caregivers to have to keep retelling their story. So I'm always going to promote the NOFASD website, not because I get something from that, but because it's there as such a great support for families. The FASD Hub is another great site to go to. And also NACHO have a Strong Born campaign, which is a fantastic campaign, which is really well developed, really strengths-based for families and individuals who are working with or are from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds as well. So whilst NOFASD do certainly have resources in those areas, the Strong Born campaign has been released in the last couple of years and has got some great supports and opportunities to engage with the conversation, which is very positive.
Oh, that's great. And do you have a shop?
We do, Kayla, we do. So on the NOFASD website, there's a shop, and anybody who visits our site will be able to see that in the top ribbon on the FASD website. And we also have a contact us button there. We have a news button, frequently asked questions, and also a donate button as well for anybody who is interested in supporting the cause and supporting families and individuals who are affected by FASD. I wouldn't mind just circling back, if that's okay, Kayla, just to your question around the supports available. And I probably talked very sort of much about immediate supports, but I should sort of more expansively mention that support for FASD assessment, and not the whole assessment, but some supports are available through Medicare scheme. From a GP referral through to a paediatrician, there are some supports there for people who are under the age of 25 through Medicare. And the NDIS do support individuals with FASD. It really is incredibly important, though, for people accessing the NDIS that they are informed and they understand their child or the adult they engage with or care for, to really know more about their areas of functional impairment. So that's where allied health professionals who are FASD informed are absolutely crucial in the process to really explain and identify where somebody needs supports due to their functional impairment. So there is support through the Medicare Benefits Scheme, MBS, and through the NDIS. Again, through the NOFASD website, there's more information there so that people have got one sort of source to go to if they need to.
Well, that's great. And you're mentioning about donations before. How can people donate?
Yeah, so we make it nice and simple because we've got, as a small charity, we do have DGR status, so people are able to get a receipt for their kind contribution. And on our website, as in the top ribbon there, it's got a donate button, so people can visit there. And if they want to know more before they consider donating, they can go to our About Us tab on the website, which talks more about who we are, what we do, and about FASD being the most prevalent non-genetic disability in Australia, so really needs recognition, identification, and to be talked about more so that we stop shaming and blaming families and individuals.
Yes, exactly. So true. Would you mind sharing your personal story with us, please?
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. And I know we talked about this at the start, and I said I'm always keen to mention this afterwards because
Yes.
I want people to hear from me in my role as the CEO of NOFASD, because I came to the organisation 8 years ago purely because I was interested in FASD. I had worked with many families and individuals in management roles, engaging through the drug and alcohol space and out-of-home care, and also in the justice area. So I thought I knew quite a lot about FASD, but I had done what many of us do, and I had othered FASD, I guess. When I started doing my research just over 8 years ago, I kept looking at all of the studies and thinking, gee, this is so interesting, because our eldest son, so I've got two biological children, our eldest son, he ticks all of these red flags, all of these boxes that suggest that he could have been, behaviourally particularly, that he could have been prenatally alcohol exposed. And I was thinking, but I didn't drink during my pregnancy. That was my first thought process. And then I remember sitting in my first session with a colleague who was training me at the time and seeing a gestational developmental chart from conception through to the end of the 38 weeks. And I remember seeing on that chart that during weeks 3 to, I think it's about 3 to 8, that the central nervous system was highly vulnerable during that time of pregnancy. It's there's no safe time throughout pregnancy, but those first sort of 6 to 8 weeks really a vulnerable time for the fetus because it's so tiny and it can't process the alcohol in the same way that obviously the mother could process the alcohol. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I consumed alcohol on my night of conception. And I also consumed alcohol probably on 2 or 3 more occasions before my pregnancy was confirmed at 6.5 weeks. And my consumption rate, just to sort of, be clear with your listeners, would have been classed as a binge drink, which is more than 4 standard drinks. So for me, on those nights as a professional woman who was out with my husband on a Friday night having a meal, that probably would have been a bottle of wine. That was my alcohol of choice at the time and my method of, if you like, of when I would consume socially. So yeah, our son would have been exposed probably 3 or 4 times to alcohol before my pregnancy confirmation. And I was, we'd taken our son, he was a very fussy baby. We weren't able to breastfeed. He woke repeatedly, after 40 minutes throughout the night and day, and probably didn't actually sleep right through until he was about 8 years old from memory. They were hazy days. But there were many things for him. He had trouble with his teeth formation. He had enamel issues. He had emotional, I won't say emotional dysregulation because he was actually, his regulation was not that bad and is not that, not that affected. But certainly being able to calm himself or self-settle. There were many, many factors. And I think probably the real sort of noticeable parts beyond those early developmental stages for him would probably have been when he was at primary school, at kindy, and one day he would know all of his colours and letters and be really switched on, and then the next day he may have forgotten them. And that gap continued to widen every year. And we have the privilege of being able to sort of put in extra programs and extra tutoring, and he stayed sort of, just below the average academically with his group and his peers until he got to about the age of 9 or 10. And then that difference really seemed to grow and grow. And it was when I joined NOFASD that I realised FASD could be part of that puzzle. And he was finally diagnosed when he was 14 years old.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And I would just like to mention the NOFASD helpline again, which is 1-800-860-613. And there may be people listening today who hear my story, who hear more about FASD and NOFASD Australia and think that this could be part of their life or somebody they know or somebody they've worked with. So I would encourage them to reach out to us. And we do have, whilst they may not answer the helpline, one of our wonderful staff will, but they can refer people listening to bio mums if they would like to talk to somebody else who's been in the same position.
Oh, that's great that there's support out there. Is there anything you want to recap or talk about that you feel like we haven't?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that as a question. The trouble is, it makes me want to talk for the next hour, and I don't think that's our purpose today. What I would say is that, really highlighting the strengths of individuals with FASD is also really key. And I know with our son, if I talk personally, that's probably the way I should go. But I know with him, when we had the FASD diagnosis, whilst I will never deny there was guilt and personal shame that I felt towards the fact that I knew that my prenatal alcohol consumption had caused our son's challenges, there was nothing I could do to change that. It was something that had happened based on the knowledge I had and based on our circumstances. And I just want to say that finally having the diagnosis actually was quite validating for us, if I'm honest. It changed how my husband and I parented. It changed the perspective of our son, who, he was 14 when he was finally diagnosed, but we were watching these challenging behaviours and what appeared to be, he wouldn't do things and he would willfully do things that he knew weren't what we would agree to as a family. We started to learn that it wasn't that he wouldn't, it's that he couldn't. He couldn't understand cause and effect at that time. He couldn't make the right choice, even though he knew what he could do. He would then potentially still make choices that were outside of what we would support in our values and beliefs as a family. And much of that was really hard at the time. But I think, certainly having that understanding that his brain works differently, that he's got some of the most amazing skills and strengths in the way that he is able to engage with people, his charisma, his ability to what would I say? Sell snow to the Eskimos, which I know is not a term I should say, but sell snow to the Inuit peoples. He just had that kind of way about him and has that way about him. So there are so many strengths, and for our son, whilst he might not be able to pick up a manual and read through to learn how to do something, if he watches YouTube videos on repeat and he is reinforced and supported, then he can do incredibly well. And that's the same for individuals with FASD to greater and lesser extents of the impacts of prenatal alcohol exposure. But there are always strengths and there are always opportunities for individuals to live really, really positive lives with the right supports and understanding.
Oh, that's really lovely and beautiful. And so for further information, should people go to the website and your Facebook page and things?
Yes, please do. So we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Blue Sky now. We have our website. You can very quickly Google us or use AI to find us. And I would just say for anybody who has heard today's conversation, whether it's through our helpline 1-800 number, whether it's through our contact page on our website, or whether it's engaging with us on our social media, please do start sharing the message and do so in a supportive, non-stigmatizing way, because the more we can talk about alcohol exposure in pregnancy, for all of the reasons we've talked about why that might happen, then the more that we can bring it out of the dark and into the light and get support. So thank you.
No worries, exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today, making us more aware about FASD and NOFASD. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone for listening. Take care, have a great day, and bye-bye.